What if I told you that thousands of Justice Department lawyers have quit, been fired, or taken buyouts since Trump took office in 2025, that roughly 70% of the DOJ's Civil Rights Division has walked out the door, and that entire units defending Trump's policies in court have been hollowed out as experienced attorneys refuse to twist facts or violate ethical rules for this administration? What if I told you that 69 of 110 lawyers, that's 7%, in the federal programs branch, which defends Trump's executive actions in court, have abandoned ship since the 2024 election, leaving the administration struggling to defend its own policies because competent lawyers don't want their names associated with what courts keep ruling are illegal actions? And what if I told you that 7 DOJ prosecutors resigned in a single day rather than follow orders to drop federal corruption charges against New York Mayor Eric Adams in what legal experts compared to Nixon's Saturday Night Massacre? Would you believe that the lawyer exodus from Trump's Justice Department is so severe that the agency can't fill vacancies, that qualified candidates from top law schools are refusing to apply, and that those who remain are increasingly inexperienced political operatives with no prosecutorial background, rather than career attorneys committed to the rule of law? Because that's exactly what's happening right now. And if you think this is normal turnover between administrations, ask yourself, when in American history has an entire government legal apparatus collapsed mid-administration because lawyers refuse to participate in what they describe as lawless policies that violate their ethical obligations? Before we break down exactly how many lawyers have fled each DOJ division and why this isn't normal attrition, but mass rejection of Trump's legal agenda, what the Eric Adams case resignations reveal about prosecutors being ordered to politicize justice in ways that violate basic legal ethics, how the federal programs branch collapse means Trump's policies are being challenged in court without adequate legal defense because competent lawyers won't defend indefensible actions, and why the comparison to Nixon's Saturday Night Massacre isn't hyperbole, but an accurate parallel to what happens when presidents demand lawyers violate their professional duties. I need to be clear about something. Do you really think mainstream media is going to explain what it means when 5,500 legal professionals abandon a Justice Department mid-administration? Do you think they're going to connect the dots between mass attorney resignations and courts repeatedly ruling Trump's actions illegal? Do you think they're going to analyze why lawyers cite professional ethics rules when they quit? Or what it means when the Civil Rights Division loses 70% of its workforce in months? Or are they just going to report the numbers without explaining that this level of lawyer exodus signals an administration pushing legal boundaries so aggressively that career attorneys who survived previous Republican and Democratic administrations alike are saying, I can't ethically participate in this? That's why we built Politics in Action, to bring you real stories about institutional collapse that corporate media underplays because they're afraid of seeming partisan when they explain that thousands of lawyers say, quitting isn't normal and reflects fundamental lawlessness. We're not controlled by advertisers who benefit from normalizing what's happening or media conglomerates that treat lawyer mass resignations as just another political story, rather than a constitutional crisis. We're here to break down what happens when an entire government legal apparatus rejects working for a president, because doing so would compromise their professional ethics and potentially their law licenses. If you want to understand why DOJ veterans are fleeing and what it means when prosecutors compare this to Watergate-era corruption, subscribe to this channel right now. We bring you analysis every single day that connects institutional breakdown to real-world consequences. Just hit subscribe below. And if you believe journalism should explain when thousands of government lawyers walking out signals something fundamentally broken about how power is being wielded, drop a comment and join this community that refuses to normalize the abnormal. All right, let's break this down. So what are the actual numbers we're talking about when we say the Justice Department is hemorrhaging lawyers? How many people have left and from which specific divisions? Justice Connection, an advocacy group tracking departures, estimates around 5,500 people, including many attorneys but also other DOJ staff, have quit the department, been fired, or taken buyouts offered by the Trump administration since he took office in January 2025. That's not a small number. That's thousands of experienced legal professionals abandoning the Justice Department in less than a year. But why is this happening? What's driving this mass exodus? Is it just normal turnover that happens when administrations change? Or is something different happening that makes experienced lawyers decide they can't stay? Let's start with the Civil Rights Division, because what's happened there is particularly dramatic. How much of the division's legal workforce has left? According to NPR reporting from May 2025, roughly 70% of the DOJ's Civil Rights Division lawyers are gone. 70%. Think about what that means. 7 out of every 10 lawyers who were working to enforce federal civil rights laws have left their positions. Some quit outright. Others took the administration's deferred resignation program. Others retired early. but the result is the same. The division has been hollowed out. And here's what's important. This didn't happen during Trump's first term. DOJ veterans say there was no mass exodus like this between 2017 and 2021. So what's different now? What changed that made 70% of civil rights lawyers decide they couldn't do their jobs under this administration? The answer lies in how the Trump administration has redefined the division's mission. What was the Civil Rights Division traditionally supposed to do? What cases did it handle? Historically, the division enforced laws against discrimination, racial discrimination, voting rights violations, disability rights, housing discrimination, employment discrimination. It was the part of the federal government that sued states, localities, and private entities that violated people's civil rights. It was staffed by lawyers who believed in that mission and spent careers working on it. But what's the division being told to focus on now under Trump appointee Harmeet Dillon? The division is being reshaped to enforce the president's executive orders rather than traditional civil rights laws. Attorneys are being forced onto task forces focused on Trump priorities like certain interpretations of anti-Semitism or transgender issues, rather than the broad civil rights enforcement they were hired to do. And here's the critical part. Many lawyers feel they can no longer do the work they've always been able to do, including work they did during Trump's first administration. That's why they're leaving. It's not about partisan politics. It's about the mission itself being fundamentally changed in ways that make career civil rights lawyers conclude they can't ethically participate. What did Harmeet Dillon, the Trump-appointed head of the Civil Rights Division, say about these departures? Did she express concern about losing institutional knowledge and experienced attorneys? Quite the opposite. At a Federalist Society event, Dillon acknowledged the departures and said, "We wish them well in their future endeavors and their passions. They need to pursue them elsewhere. That's not going to be happening at the DOJ." Read that carefully. The person running the Civil Rights Division is essentially saying, if you want to do traditional civil rights work, leave, because we're not doing that anymore. That's not a leadership approach that values institutional expertise or continuity. That's a purge. That's deliberately pushing out career attorneys who don't align with the new political mission. Now let's look at another hard-hit unit, the Federal Programs Branch. What does this office do, and why does it matter if they're losing lawyers? The Federal Programs Branch is the part of DOJ that defends the administration in court when its policies get challenged. When Trump issues an executive order and it gets sued, which happens constantly because his orders often push legal boundaries, the Federal Programs Branch lawyers are the ones who go to court and argue the government's position. They're the frontline defense for Trump's agenda. So you'd think the administration would want to keep these lawyers, right? You'd think staffing this unit would be a priority, but what's actually happened? According to Reuters reporting from July 2025, around 69 of the 110 lawyers in the Federal Programs Branch have left since the 2024 election. That's 62.7% of the unit. Nearly two-thirds of the lawyers whose job is to defend Trump in court have quit. Why would lawyers whose entire job is defending the administration's policies be leaving in such numbers? What does that tell us? One lawyer who left the unit described staff as demoralized and frustrated by the non-stop barrage of legal challenges to Trump's policies. But it's deeper than just being busy. At least 3 lawyers from the branch quit specifically because they feared facing sanctions for refusing to skew facts in court or violate ethics rules under pressure from the department. Let that sink in. Lawyers are leaving because they're being pressured to present misleading information to federal judges or violate professional conduct rules. And they're choosing to quit rather than comply because lying to courts can get you disbarred, sanctioned, or even prosecuted. These aren't partisan Democrats abandoning a Republican administration. These are career government lawyers who've worked across multiple administrations, including Trump's first term, who are now saying, what we're being asked to do crosses ethical lines we can't cross. How unprecedented is this level of turnover mid-administration? Is this normal when a president takes office? Sources told Reuters that high turnover at the Federal Programs Branch is common between administrations. When a new president comes in, some lawyers leave and new ones are hired. But this level of staff turnover in the middle of a presidential administration is unprecedented. Peter Keisler, who led the DOJ's civil division under President George W. Bush, told Reuters, "We've never had an administration pushing the legal envelope so quickly, so aggressively, and across such a broad range of government policies and programs. The demands are intensifying at the same time that the ranks of lawyers there to defend these cases are dramatically thinning. So even someone who served in a previous Republican administration is saying, this is different. This is more aggressive than anything we've seen. And it's happening while the legal workforce capable of defending it collapses." Now let's talk about the Eric Adams case, because this is where the lawyer exodus became most visible and drew direct comparisons to Watergate. What happened in February 2025 that made 7 DOJ prosecutors resign in a single day? Mayor Eric Adams of New York was indicted in September 2024 on federal charges: bribery, conspiracy, fraud, and 2 counts of soliciting illegal foreign campaign donations related to alleged Turkish government influence. The case was pending in federal court. Then, in February 2025, Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove ordered prosecutors to dismiss the charges against Adams. Why? Not because the evidence was weak or because Adams was innocent. The order came amid reports that Adams had signaled willingness to cooperate with Trump administration immigration policies. Legal experts and prosecutors interpreted this as a quid pro quo. Drop the charges in exchange for political cooperation. That's using prosecutorial power to influence elected officials' policy positions. And prosecutors who were told to file that dismissal said, absolutely not. Who exactly refused to follow the order? And what did they do instead? 2 attorneys from the Southern District of New York, Acting U.S. Attorney Danielle Sassoon and Assistant U.S. Attorney Hagan Scotton, resigned rather than file the dismissal. Sassoon alleged in her resignation letter that dismissing charges was intended as a quid pro quo, indicating Adams would assist with Trump policies in exchange for having his prosecution dropped. Scotton wrote, "Any assistant U.S. attorney would know that our laws and traditions do not allow using the prosecutorial power to influence other citizens, much less elected officials, in this way. If no lawyer within earshot of the president is willing to give him that advice, then I expect you will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion. But it was never going to be me." That's a career prosecutor calling out what he sees as corruption and refusing to participate even though it cost him his job. But it didn't stop there. What happened when Bove couldn't get Southern District prosecutors to dismiss the Adams case? He turned to the Justice Department's Criminal Division Public Integrity Section in Washington, D.C. And what did those prosecutors do when given the same order? 5 officials resigned from the Public Integrity Section rather than carry out the dismissal, including Acting Head Kevin Driscoll and Acting Chief John Keller. So 7 total DOJ prosecutors, 2 from SDNY, 5 from Public Integrity, resigned in protest on the same day in February 2025. And then in April, 3 more federal prosecutors resigned after refusing to admit wrongdoing related to the case. That's 10 prosecutors total who said, "I will not use my position to provide special treatment to an elected official in exchange for political favors." What did the judge presiding over the Adams case say about all this? How did the court respond to prosecutors resigning rather than following orders to dismiss? Judge Dale Ho dismissed Adams's case in April 2025, but with extremely critical findings. Ho reported finding no other examples of dismissing charges against elected officials to allow them to facilitate federal policy goals. He indicated this may amount to special dispensation, which violates the basic promise of equal justice under law. So the judge is essentially saying, this is unprecedented, this looks like preferential treatment for political reasons, and this undermines the foundational principle that law applies equally to everyone. The prosecutors who resigned were vindicated. Their concerns about corruption of the justice system were confirmed by the judge's ruling. How have journalists and legal scholars characterized these mass resignations? What historical parallel are they drawing? Multiple outlets compared the series of resignations to the 1973 Saturday Night Massacre, when President Richard Nixon ordered DOJ executives to fire Archibald Cox, the special prosecutor investigating Watergate. Nixon's Attorney General Elliot Richardson resigned rather than carry out the order, as did Deputy Attorney General William Ruckelshaus. Loyola University Chicago law professor Juliet Sorensen noted that in each case, lawyers resigned as a matter of professional responsibility and refused to get in line behind unlawful orders. So this isn't journalists being hyperbolic. Legal scholars are saying, this parallels Watergate. This is what it looks like when a president tries to corrupt the justice system and career lawyers refuse to participate. The Saturday Night Massacre was a defining moment that accelerated Nixon's downfall. And we're seeing a similar dynamic now, prosecutors resigning rather than execute orders they believe violate the rule of law. Let's talk about the Solicitor General's office, because even the elite lawyers who argue the administration's cases before the Supreme Court are leaving. What's happening at this normally stable, prestigious office? According to Washington Post reporting from April 2025, at least half of the frontline lawyers in the Solicitor General's office are preparing to leave or have already announced departures. The SG's office represents the federal government before the Supreme Court. It's one of the most prestigious legal positions in government, staffed by top graduates from elite law schools who typically stay for years, regardless of which party controls the White House. So when half the office is leaving mid-administration during intense litigation over presidential initiatives, that signals something extraordinary. These aren't political appointees rotating out. These are career lawyers whose job is to defend government actions before the highest court, and they're deciding they don't want to do that for this administration. Now, what about hiring? Is the Justice Department successfully replacing all these departing lawyers? Can they find qualified candidates to backfill thousands of vacancies? Here's where the crisis gets worse. The department is struggling massively to fill vacancies. According to people familiar with hiring processes, the department faces a lack of qualified candidates, bureaucratic delays, and hiring freezes. And there's a specific problem with candidates from top law schools. Traditionally, DOJ attracted high-performing graduates from places like Georgetown, Yale, Harvard, but applications from these schools have dropped dramatically. Why? Multiple factors. In February 2025, the acting U.S. attorney in D.C. wrote to Georgetown Law saying his office wouldn't consider hiring anyone from schools with DEI policies, which is basically all top law schools. The Trump administration has attacked elite universities, launched investigations into them, threatened funding. The message to talented law graduates is clear. We don't want you unless you align with our political priorities. So who is applying to work at DOJ now if top law school graduates aren't? What kind of candidates is the department getting? People familiar with hiring say those applying now tend to be more conservative and ideologically aligned with Trump. They're more likely to have political backgrounds coming from Republican congressional offices and advocacy groups, rather than legal experience. They're often young attorneys with little relevant prosecutorial experience, or mid to late career lawyers with no background in prosecutions. The Justice Department is being reshaped from an institution staffed by experienced career prosecutors into an agency staffed by political operatives who may not have the legal skills to do complex litigation, but who won't push back on questionable legal theories. What does this mean for the actual functioning of the Justice Department? What happens when thousands of experienced lawyers leave and aren't adequately replaced? The immediate impact is that the department can't handle its caseload effectively. Immigration judges, about 80 of whom were fired, have created a backlog of cases that's growing because the administration can't fill those vacancies. Lawyers in units like Federal Programs Branch who defend Trump policies in court are overwhelmed by legal challenges and don't have enough staff to adequately brief and argue cases. This means Trump's own policies are more vulnerable in court because they're being defended by inexperienced or overworked attorneys who can't match the quality of representation on the other side. It's ironic. Trump's purge of experienced DOJ lawyers is undermining his ability to successfully implement his agenda through the courts. But there's a deeper, more alarming implication. What happens to the rule of law when the Justice Department stops being staffed by career professionals committed to legal principles and becomes staffed by political loyalists committed to a president? The traditional DOJ model was that career prosecutors made charging decisions based on evidence and law, insulated from political pressure. That's why we have norms against presidents directing specific prosecutions. That's why attorneys general are supposed to maintain independence. But when you purge thousands of career attorneys and replace them with political operatives, you fundamentally change the institution. You create a department that serves the president's interests rather than enforcing law impartially. And the lawyers who are leaving understand this. That's why they're citing professional ethics when they resign. They're saying, I became a lawyer to uphold the law, and this administration is asking me to use law as a political weapon, and I won't do it. Let's connect this to what lawyers are specifically saying when they resign. What language are they using? What concerns are they articulating? In the Eric Adams case, prosecutors explicitly wrote that using prosecutorial power to influence elected officials violates laws and traditions. That's not vague. That's lawyers saying, what you're asking me to do is corrupt. In the Federal Programs Branch, lawyers cited fear of sanctions for refusing to skew facts or violate ethics rules. That's lawyers saying, I'm being pressured to lie to courts, and I won't risk my license or my integrity. In the Civil Rights Division, lawyers say they can no longer do work they've always done, including during Trump's first term. That's lawyers saying, the mission itself has been corrupted beyond recognition. These aren't partisan complaints. These are professional judgments by career attorneys that they cannot ethically continue working under these conditions. Now let's talk about lawyers outside DOJ who are also resigning over Trump-related work. What happened at major law firms? According to Bloomberg Law reporting from August 2025, at least 12 associates at top law firms loudly quit after their firms made deals with Trump's administration, pledging nearly $1 billion in free legal services. These weren't government lawyers. These were private sector attorneys at firms like Skadden, Simpson Thacher and Bartlett, Davis Polk, and Kirkland and Ellis. Young lawyers making $315,000 per year walked away from those salaries because they didn't want their firms capitulating to Trump. One lawyer, Sunik Muradian, left to become a public defender making 1/3 his big law salary. He said, "It is going to be impossible both in the short and long term to come close to the wealth I could have accumulated had I remained in big law. I was fortunate enough to just barely pay off my student loans before leaving. That's someone choosing principle over money in a really concrete way. What does it say when even private sector lawyers are resigning over Trump work? Doesn't that suggest this is about more than just partisan disagreement? Private law firms aren't politically aligned institutions. They serve clients across the political spectrum. Partners at these firms often have wildly different personal politics. But making deals with Trump administration created such backlash from associates that firms are losing young talent. And here's what the lawyers who quit said. They accused their firms of capitulating or bending the knee to Trump. They saw the deals as normalizing lawless behavior. Some are now working at small firms taking on the Trump administration in court, literally going from defending Trump-aligned entities to suing the administration. That's not just changing jobs. That's switching sides because you believe one side represents law and the other represents lawlessness. But let's be realistic about consequences. What happens to lawyers who loudly quit over Trump? Do they easily find new positions? According to recruiters quoted in the Bloomberg article, it's risky. Clients don't want controversy. Some clients might be pro-Trump, others might not like lawyers who bring attention to themselves. Law firms view vocal lawyers, especially those criticizing management decisions, as liabilities. So most lawyers who quit big law over Trump deals are between jobs months later. They're having trouble finding positions at other major firms. Some are looking at government work, nonprofits, small boutique firms. They've effectively sacrificed their big law careers for principle. And most who spoke to reporters said, "We don't regret it, and we don't want to go back." That's how strong their conviction is that they couldn't ethically participate. Now let's zoom out to the bigger picture. What does it mean for American democracy when thousands of lawyers across government and private sector are refusing to work for or with the Trump administration? What does mass lawyer resignation signal? Lawyers are officers of the court. They're bound by professional ethics. They can lose their licenses for lying to judges, for assisting criminal conduct, for violating client confidences. When lawyers resign en masse citing ethics concerns, they're saying, "Continuing would require me to violate my professional duties in ways that could destroy my career and potentially lead to criminal liability." That's an extraordinary statement. These aren't political appointees rotating out. These are career professionals saying the administration is asking them to do things that cross fundamental ethical lines. And here's the specific concern about what happens next. If competent, ethical lawyers won't work for Trump, who will? Who fills the vacuum when thousands of experienced attorneys leave? The administration has been clear. They want ideological loyalty over expertise. They want lawyers who will push legal theories that career attorneys say are unsound. They want prosecutors who will drop cases for political reasons. They want litigators who will make arguments in court that experienced lawyers say are frivolous. And they're willing to staff the Justice Department with inexperienced political operatives to get that. But here's the problem. Courts don't care about your politics. Judges evaluate whether your legal arguments are sound. And when you're staffing legal positions with people who don't have the skills or experience to make competent arguments, you lose cases. Trump is finding that out. His administration keeps losing in court, partly because the lawyers defending his policies aren't up to the task. Let's talk about what this means for specific Trump policies that are being challenged in court. If the federal programs branch is down to 41 lawyers from 110, how effectively can they defend executive orders on birthright citizenship, immigration detention without due process, tariffs, and federal bureaucracy reshaping, all of which are being challenged? They can't. There aren't enough attorneys to properly staff all these cases. The lawyers who remain are overwhelmed. They're being asked to defend policies that courts keep ruling are illegal. And they're going up against skilled opposition counsel from organizations like the ACLU, state attorneys' general offices, and private firms that are fully staffed and highly motivated to win. This is why Trump keeps losing in court despite controlling the executive branch. His own legal team has collapsed. What about the long-term damage to DOJ as an institution? Can it recover from losing 5,500 people, including huge percentages of experienced attorneys? Institutions are built on accumulated knowledge, on norms and practices passed down from senior attorneys to junior ones, on expertise developed over years or decades. When you lose 70% of a division like civil rights, you don't just lose people, you lose institutional memory. You lose expertise in complex areas like voting rights, litigation, or disability discrimination cases. You lose relationships with stakeholders and community organizations, and you can't easily rebuild that. Even if a future administration wanted to restore DOJ to its traditional mission, it would take years to recruit and train enough lawyers to replace what was lost. The damage Trump is doing to DOJ will outlast his presidency by many years. And let's connect this to the broader authoritarian playbook. What do authoritarian leaders do to justice systems? They purge independent-minded prosecutors and judges. They install loyalists who will use law as a political weapon rather than applying it impartially. They create fear among legal professionals that doing their jobs properly will cost them their careers. We're watching that happen in real time in America. Thousands of DOJ lawyers are leaving because they fear sanctions for refusing to violate ethics rules. Prosecutors are resigning rather than drop cases for political reasons. Career attorneys are being pushed out and replaced with inexperienced loyalists. This is how rule of law erodes. It doesn't happen overnight with a dramatic coup. It happens gradually as institutions are hollowed out and the people committed to principles are driven out. So here's the bottom line when you put all these pieces together. What does Trump's DOJ hemorrhages 5,500 lawyers as Civil Rights Division collapses actually mean? It means roughly 5,500 Justice Department employees, including many experienced attorneys, have quit, been fired, or taken buyouts in less than a year since Trump took office in 2025. It means 70% of the Civil Rights Division is gone because the mission was fundamentally changed in ways career attorneys couldn't ethically support. It means 62.7% of the federal programs branch that defends Trump in court has walked out because lawyers are being pressured to skew facts and violate ethics rules. It means 7 prosecutors resigned in a single day, rather than drop corruption charges against Mayor Eric Adams for political reasons, drawing direct comparisons to Nixon's Saturday Night Massacre. It means half the Solicitor General's office that argues before the Supreme Court is leaving during intense litigation. It means DOJ can't fill vacancies because qualified candidates from top law schools don't want to work for an administration that attacks their schools and demands ideological loyalty over expertise. It means the department is being reshaped from career professionals into political operatives who may not have the skills to win in court, but won't push back on questionable orders. It means even private sector lawyers are resigning from lucrative positions because they don't want their firms capitulating to Trump. And it means we're watching institutional collapse in real time as thousands of lawyers choose their professional ethics and potentially their careers over participating in what they see as corruption of the justice system. This isn't normal turnover. This isn't partisan disagreement. This is mass rejection by legal professionals of an administration they believe is fundamentally lawless. Keep your eyes on this because when lawyers flee en masse citing ethics concerns, when prosecutors resign rather than follow orders they liken to Watergate, when entire DOJ divisions are hollowed out, that signals something broken at the core of how power is being wielded. The lawyers who left are voting with their careers, and their message is clear. We cannot ethically participate in this. That's not a political statement. That's a professional judgment that should alarm everyone who cares about rule of law surviving in America.